Have you ever wondered what would happen if you took a full-size rear-wheel drive American sedan and injected it with the supercharged ferocity from a street-legal drag car? It sounds pretty intense, right? Well, our friends at Dodge now offer that exact same formula from the factory. And this week, we've been doing our best to try and tame the fastest, most powerful, mass-produced sedan ever built. So for this review, I suggest you put on your seatbelts and strap them down tight, because today we're going for a spin and showing you all around the new 2021 Dodge Charger SRT Hellcat Redeye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so welcome to the 2021 Dodge Charger Hellcat Redeye. And I know what you're saying already. Come on, Bobby, quit the chit chat. I want to hear that supercharger scream. I want to see how scary this Redeye can really be. Well, I'm gonna tell you guys right now, even just sitting here looking at an empty street in front of me, just waiting to take this thing for a drive, I'm going to tell you straight up, this is the most untamable muscle car you will ever get the chance to drive, if you are one of the lucky ones to even get a chance to drive one, let alone own one. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is a cat that likes to show its fangs a lot more than just your standard Hellcat. And I'm not just talking about the fact that this is a 4,600-pound car with more crank horsepower than a McLaren Senna. I'm also talking about what happens when you actually go to take ownership of one. Now, the Redeye itself actually starts life as a regular SRT Hellcat wide body with a base MSRP of $69,995, which actually sounds pretty reasonable for a sedan with over 700 horsepower from the get-go. However, you have to add $8,600 to that price if you want to get into the Redeye itself, plus any other additional options, which we have a good few of on this car, which also includes a $2,100 gas guzzler tax, plus a $1,495 destination charge, and total price on this exact vehicle here comes to $89,155. And that's not even the most expensive part. You want things like a sunroof or the 19-speaker Harman Kardon audio system? Those are about $2,000 a piece. So in all, if you fully loaded one of these out, you could be knocking on the door of, you know, maybe a couple grand short of $100,000. But then again, it's really worth it. And I truly mean that. And I'm just going to quit the chit chat right now, because all I want to do is hit that start button and get out on the road. So let's do that, shall we? So guys, what's the first thing you know you want to do when you're given the keys to a rear-wheel drive, full-size American sedan with more horsepower than a multi-million-dollar supercar? Well, you want to do this. Oh my God! What the hell? So once you've gotten your brain, your organs, and hopefully all of your senses back in their designated spots, and you actually put this car in its most comfortable setting, the Redeye really is not as scary as I thought it was going to be. Okay, I know it's got almost 800 horsepower up front, but still at the same time, it doesn't feel like the scariest car that I've ever driven. That only happens when I put my foot down and this car is poised and tensed and ready to just unleash hell on whatever is around it. Now, speaking of unleashing hell, let's just talk about that powertrain for a second, shall we? Because this thing by Dodge themselves has been labeled as a Hellcat possessed by a demon. And they are 110% right, because the Redeye borrows essentially the same powertrain that powered the street-legal Dodge Demon drag car. But instead of the Demon's 840 horsepower, Dodge kind of turned the knob back ever so slightly. So now we have to make do with 797 horsepower and 707 foot-pounds of torque. And if those numbers aren't enough to whet your appetite, let me just give you a little bit more. This car, in its most hardcore setting, will knock out a 0 to 60 run in 3.6 seconds. It will do the quarter mile in 10.6 at 129 miles an hour. And if you've got the guts, this full-size sedan that weighs over 2.5 tons will do 203 miles an hour. What? Now, aside from the ferocity that this car is capable of, let's not forget that at its core, this is still a Dodge Charger. It carries a little bit of the same design as, say, the local Enterprise's Charger V6 SXT, or even a little bit more with your dad's Charger RT. But at the same time, the Redeye is not going to be as laid back or as lazy as something like that. You definitely will feel the road in this car, despite the fact that it has a Bilstein adaptive dampening system, which once you settle this car down and hopefully your organs and your brain and your senses haven't been rearranged, it can actually be pretty quiet and comfortable out on the road. The road noise isn't terrible. It's still kind of noisy out here, but at the same time, it is still somewhat of a decent car to drive. Steering's nice and weighted. It feels very compliant out on the road, and that's actually something that very much shocked me when I started driving this car for the first time. So now let's say you've got just at $100,000 in the bank and you want the most vicious, outlandish, and the most badass car that money can buy. Well, let's face it, you'd pretty much be spoiled for choice any way you turn. You can go with something like a supercar, like a Porsche, or maybe a used Ferrari or something like that. You could definitely get the exotic badge for that sort of price point. You could even go with something like a slightly cheaper car, and through the aftermarket scene could make it just as fast as something like this. However, as a factory-built, mass-produced, high-performance vehicle, I don't see how you could go wrong with the Redeye. But at the same time, if you want to spend less money but still have an insane amount of power, the regular Hellcat widebody is a solid choice. As I was mentioning earlier, under $70,000 will get you a standard Hellcat widebody Charger. Now, would I be comfortable spending 80 grand? Maybe, maybe not. I would buy this car primarily just for the engine. I wouldn't buy it as a daily driver, as it gets 12 miles to the gallon in the city, 21 on the highway, but like anybody cares. But at the same time, I just love the muscular package that Dodge has put together here. This car is outrageous. And I'll tell you what's even more outrageous, or maybe a little bit less outrageous than the nuclear firepower that we have under the hood of this thing. It's the muscular looks that this car puts off. So let's head back to our nice little quiet spot and talk about the inside and the out. Now, aside from the nuclear firepower that hides up under the hood of this Redeye, when you actually look at it at a glance, to me it really looks like nothing more than a standard wide-body Hellcat Charger. In fact, really the only differences I've been able to distinguish this from its sibling car during the week I've had it is just simply the Redeye badges that you'll find on the front grille, the ones on the side fenders, and of course the one on the trunk. But other than that, if any passerby were to look at this, they would genuinely think it's just a standard wide-body Hellcat. Now, that's not to say this car doesn't look mean in its own right. First of all, sitting here in the triple nickel exterior with the optional carbon stripes on it, and honestly, this paint job just looks phenomenal on this. Of course, you can get things like the hood in matte black, just make this thing look downright sinister. Now, there is one other additional change that Dodge has made for the 2021 model year, which is a redesigned hood. So you have the giant power bulge there in the middle. Of course, huge heat extractors here on the side, letting all the heat out of that high output Hemi up front. And then of course we actually have a functional hood scoop going up through the middle. So not only do you have a huge amount of cooling power going through just the front grills, upper and lower, but now you have a little bit more air directed right at the supercharger thanks to that functional hood scoop. Now, as far as the front end design itself, I really love the way this thing looks. First of all, look at those fender flares. This car is 3.5 inches wider than a standard Charger Hellcat. And of course, it carries a lot of higher end options. So the headlights are bifunctional high intensity discharge units with LED daytime running lights. The turn signals are full LED, and of course they sit on either side of the blacked out grille with the standard Hellcat badge across the front. Of course, you have kind of this little nostril running between the upper grille here, and of course the large ones dominating the lower half of the front end here. Now, one thing that's interesting is although the ParkSense parking assist system is standard on the Redeye, you don't see any sensors for it on the front. It's primarily focused on the rear of the vehicle. So that is a little bit of an interesting one, but then again, it doesn't detract from the menacing look you get from the front of this car. Now, of course, you can't have a big beefy looking Charger like this without something serious to put in all four corners. And these 20 by 11 inch warp speed design wheels painted in the beautiful light carbon paintwork definitely fit the bill of this car perfectly, especially as a nice contrast to the triple nickel exterior here on the outside of the car. Now, these are wrapped in 305 section 35Z rated Pirelli P0 3-season tires. Now, there are two different tire options on this car, just the standard Pirelli P0 and the optional 3-season tires that I have on here. The wheels and tires both are optional, as I said before. It's about $1,000 for the wheels and about $1,000 for the tires as well. And then, of course, if you look underneath, these brakes on this car are absolutely huge. You have 6 piston calipers in front, 4 in the rear, and almost 16-inch rotors in front and about 14-inch rotors in the rear. And believe me, you stamp on the brake pedal and this car will stop in a hurry. Now, you heard me talking earlier a little bit about the suspension and the Bilstein adaptive dampening system. However, there's a little bit more going on under here. So we have short long arm suspension in front, and we also have a 5-link multi-link independent suspension setup out back. Now, from a side profile, the Charger is certainly not a small vehicle by any means. Whether you get this thing as a regular RT or even here as the wide-bodied Redeye, it is no small feat for an American vehicle. This car is 201 inches from nose to tail, speaking specifically about the Redeye, but I just think that the Charger's profile is so much cleaner and a little bit more modern compared to the old school flair given off by the Challenger. Now, despite the massive length and being over 78 inches wide thanks to the fender flares and not including the mirrors, in terms of the features list down the side, aside from the distinguishing Hellcat Redeye badges there on the fenders, everything else is very standard stuff. You have body colored side view mirrors, non-power folding or anything like that. They do come equipped with blind spot monitoring and also welcome lighting. So when you unlock the vehicle, this little light underneath will shine all the way down towards the door handle of the vehicle. Now, this car does come standard with the intelligent access, and of course, what would a Hellcat be without a bright red key fob? And I love the gloss black accent on the back with the Redeye badge as well. Everything on here is standard. So at the unlock, lock, tap this button twice for the trunk, you get remote start as standard, and the panic feature, not to mention the silver releasable key blade that comes out of the bottom of the key. But all you really have to do is just have the key on your person. You can see the car is locked right now. When I grab the door handle, you hear the doors automatically unlock. And then if you want to lock it on either one of the front handles, there's a little button here, and now, whereas the Charger's front end is so aggressive and just has that real angry presence when you look at it, when you look at the Charger Redeye from the back, it really is quite aggressive, but a little bit more subtle in some ways. You still have things like full LED taillights back here. Of course, you have the LED border named the racetrack taillights. Of course, we have the LED brake lights and turn signals and the reversing lights as well. Of course, things like the backup camera and of course the large deck lid spoiler, all standard here on the Redeye. Of course, you have the blacked out Redeye Hellcat badge down there. And then, as I was mentioning up front, we only have the ParkSense rear park assist system. Of course, that goes in conjunction with the backup camera up here. So no sensors lining the front of the car. But then if you look down at the bottom, of course, you can't help but notice the active 2.75-inch dual exhaust. Now, the exhaust can best be described as follows. When you're driving this car normally, it purrs like any other V8 Charger, but poke it a little bit harder, and that slight purr turns into an absolute roar. Now, of course, basing a monster muscle car sedan on top of a family car platform, you're basically going to get all the family car extras. So things like a bigger trunk space. So if you just tap the button twice on the key, as you can see, the trunk pops open and it reveals a very, very sizable space back here. Numbers on paper, you're looking at 16.5 cubic feet of space. Of course, the rear seats do fold down as well, so you can extend that just a little bit. But this trunk is absolutely huge. I mean, you can see my tripod, which isn't even fully extended, barely makes a dent in the amount of space that you have back here. One thing I really do like is also they have enclosed the hinges back here, so you're not going to get your luggage all crushed. You can throw everything back there that you want and then some. Now, you would think with as wild and crazy as the Hellcat Redeye's exterior is, that its interior would be something to match. But when you open the door, you're basically staring down an interior that looks like a slightly upgraded version of something you'd find in a Charger RT. Okay, maybe that's a little bit of an insult, because if you look at the seats, I mean, these seats are heavily bolstered. And in this car, we actually have the optional Laguna leather and Alcantara pack. So of course you can see the Alcantara in the middle of the back and the entire lower half of the seat with the Laguna leather bolsters, nice ruffling here on the side, and of course the Hellcat badge embossed across the top. Now, the seats are heated and ventilated for both sides of the front occupants, and you also have heated seats in the rear as well. As another option, just pointing up top, we also have a suede headliner in this car at an additional cost. But apart from that, it is a very standard Charger interior, just with a few little extra upgrades. So we have the Alcantara line steering wheel here with much larger metallic paddles here on the back, and of course we have the red-faced gauges standard on most Hellcat models. But apart from that, everything else is just as you would expect from a normal Charger. Now, when you're actually sitting in the front of the Redeye, you realize that you are actually in something a little bit more special than just your run-of-the-mill Charger. Okay, I know things like the center console, the climate control, stuff like that, you could find that in a Charger RT, but at the same time, things like I said before, the Alcantara line steering wheel here with the lighted SRT logo in the middle that glows a bright red when you turn the lights on at night. You have the more uniquely shaped metal paddle shifters here on the back, of course, standard on most SRT cars. But apart from that, a lot of the stuff that you'll find in here is very rudimentary Dodge products. So on the steering wheel here, of course, we have the standard cruise control functions, no radar cruise control on this particular one. We do have the aero pad, which controls the digital half of the gauge cluster up there. And then of course we have the hands-free Bluetooth with voice recognition as well. The steering column is power tilting and telescoping, so you just move the nodule whichever way you need to adjust it, in, up, or up, down, in, or out. And then you also have the lighting controls, such as the controls for the automatic high intensity discharge headlights, interior lighting, and gauge dimming. And then of course you also have the button which opens the trunk. Now, of course, what would any Dodge product be without the 8.4-inch Uconnect infotainment display? This display has been in Dodge products for what feels like an eternity now, but of course they have updated it here and there with all different kinds of new functions, but there's really some key ones that you need to know about here in the Redeye specifically, or really any SRT product for that matter. Basic functions before that, you have things such as Bluetooth media like we have here. You have the climate page, which is basically the digitized form of the physical buttons that you'll find below the screen. If you go to controls, you have heated seats, ventilated seats for both the driver and passenger. In this car, we have a heated steering wheel and an automated mirror dimmer. If you go to the Uconnect apps, you can pretty much access everything. You have Android Auto, Apple CarPlay in here. The navigation in this car, I'll be honest, it's not really my favorite. The touch responsiveness is quite slow, and I'll be honest, it just looks a bit dated for a navigation system. I'd much rather use something like Google Maps, Waze, something like that. I think that'd be a much easier system to use in comparison to this one. And of course, you have Bluetooth phone connectivity and general information settings. Now, of course, though, what would any SRT product be without the SRT dashboard? Now, you can access this through the physical SRT button below the infotainment screen, or you can just go into the Uconnect apps and select the SRT dashboard up at the top here. But either way, once you're in the SRT dashboard, you have everything from your post-race cooldown setting, which basically means once you turn the engine off with the race cooldown active, it will activate the intercooler pump, and it will turn on the radiator fans to help cool the supercharger down and prevent heat soak. You also have the launch control settings, so all you have to do, push launch control or push the activate button up here in the touch screen. Of course, you can hold it between basically, I think it's 1500 or it's 1000 RPMs and 2500. And that of course means once you activate launch control, it will hold that there until you let go of the brake, and you will do 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. Over on the left here, we have the shift light that you can have in the dashboard. So when you're in track mode, your center part of your dash will light up, letting you know with the perfect time to shift. You have an onboard chiller, of course, to help cool the supercharger down. And then you have line lock, one of my favorite features of any SRT product. Basically, when you push the activate line lock feature, it will lock the front brakes up, you mash the gas pedal, and you can do this. But honestly, there is so much more to go through here in the SRT dashboard. So not only do you have the driving modes, and it basically tells you everything that's going on with the actual driving modes themselves, you have the performance pages, which of course are things like your horsepower, current gear, you have a G-force meter, you even have timers. You can do things like your 60 foot, 330, eighth mile speed, 1,000 foot, quarter mile, and quarter mile speed. You have other gauges such as transmission temperature, boost pressure, air to fuel ratio, intercooler temperature, so on. You have a G-force meter, which is kind of one of my favorite things. You can see just how much G-forces this thing is really generating. And you even have an onboard dyno that tells you just how much horsepower you're actually using. Now, if you are a true audiophile like yours truly, then you will definitely like a lot of the sound systems that the Redeye offers. Now, sadly, we don't have the 19-speaker Harman Kardon audio system on board this test car of mine. However, we do have the standard 6-speaker Alpine tuned audio system. And I gotta say, while it's not as bassy as I might like, I do like to listen to a lot of bass-filled songs, but other than that, it's actually pretty crisp and pretty clear, and just one push of the volume button and you get... Aside from the 8.4-inch screen, really the only other things you need to worry about in this Redeye's interior are just the physical banks of buttons located just below the screen I was mentioning earlier. Of course, you have volume, tuning knobs, the power button, and of course the browse or enter button if you need to find something on the radio. But a lot of those SRT functions that I was talking about earlier, those are located in these two buttons here. So you have the SRT dashboard, and of course the button to activate launch control. You have the mute button for the radio. You can turn the screen off entirely if you so desire, if you don't want it, say, blinding you while you're driving at night. But then if you want it back on, all you have to do is just touch the screen and it pops back into life. You do have the button to turn off the traction control, which all you need to do really is put it in track mode and it'll turn off that for you. And you also have the button to turn off the Park Sense rear park assist. If you look down below that, you have a simple dual zone automated climate control system with the fan speed in the middle, the button to turn it off, and the automatic function, front and rear defrost, temperature adjusters on either side of the fan speed wheel, and then of course you have air conditioning and air recycling. Now, continuing on with a little bit more of a simplistic theme, when you actually get down here to the lower half of the center console here, as you can see, there's really not a whole lot of buttons or anything to worry about. As you can see, I have this car's beautiful red key fob sitting here in its little holder. Of course, we have the Dodge Brothers historic logo down here inside that holder as well. Speaking of holders, before we get to the shifter, there is a nice sized little cubby right back in here. You have a 12-volt direct current outlet right here that you could just open, use for an additional charge point, in addition to the 2 USB ports that you have hidden in the center console. It is big enough, save for like my phone, although my phone is a little bit bigger thanks to its OtterBox case, so it sticks out a little bit more, but definitely convenient if you have like your phone and your wallet and you don't want to put it, say, in these 2 little cup holders here, or even in the leather-bound center console. But one of my favorite things, and sort of a nod to the old school, is the T-bar shaped shifter that allows you to select gears in the 8 HP 90 Torque Flight automatic transmission, the 8-speed gearbox that's been specifically calibrated just for the Redeye. Redeye. Now, of course, it has everything you need. You have park, reverse, which of course brings up the backup camera and that park sense rear system. Of course, you also have automatic door locks. You can put it in drive. You can flick it over into manual, and of course, that allows you to take control either via the gear stick or by the paddles themselves. And then, of course, we get to the leather-bound center console back here, which, as you can see, the first thing you notice is the 2 USB charging ports and an auxiliary port right here. These 2 USBs are not just for charging. You can plug your phone in there, and that's what will get you access to Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. You have this little removable tray right here with its nice little coin slots. I wouldn't say my phone is big enough to fit in there, but I have been able to fit in there as well. You have another 12-volt direct current plug-in down there, so if you want to plug another item in aside from the 2 USBs and the one hidden up here, you can use that as well. But apart from that, you have a decent amount of storage in there, plenty big enough for all of your slightly larger items. Now, should you find yourself wanting to be a backseat passenger in the Redeye, getting into this car is really not too difficult. It is a full-size sedan after all. I did notice I had to duck my head quite a bit because this roofline slopes down a little bit more here, especially as it gets toward the back. But once you actually close the door, first of all, the door shuts with a very solid thud. You don't exactly have a whole ton of leg room back here. I can tell you for a fact, I'm 6'1", and I have the seat moved back a little bit further maybe than I would like it. I would probably have it a little bit further up, but still you have a decent amount of leg room back here. As I said, the seats are 60-40 split, so you have the little pull handles up there on the side if you want to fold the seats forward. And let's not forget that your rear occupants have electronic devices too. So you have 2 USB ports here at the back. You have 2-stage heated seats, at least for the outer occupants. Can't say the same for the one in the middle. And then, of course, if you want to store anything back here, you also have the 2 leather-lined map pockets in the back of each seat as well. And with that being said, this now concludes our review and drive of the 2021 Dodge Charger SRT Hellcat Redeye. I do hope you guys genuinely enjoyed this review as much as I did, and if you did, please give this video a thumbs up, and also while you're at it, hit that subscribe button down below, because trust me, it does benefit the both of us in the end. At the end of the day, however, I have to give a monstrous thank you to the folks at Dodge USA and the SRT program for lending us this absolute beast for an entire week to have some fun with. But in the end, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review, and I will see y'all next time. Take care, everybody, and stay safe.